This podcast is supported by Lucasfilm and Disney+, presenting Music by John Williams. For your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Documentary or Nonfiction Special. The Hollywood Reporter calls Music by John Williams a richly satisfying tribute to an unimpeachable cinematic legend. Music by John Williams is now streaming only on Disney+. Three new documentaries profile figures who reached a pinnacle in their fields: Martha Stewart, Alice Waters, and John Williams. I'm Thom Powers, and this is Pure Nonfiction. Over the past 2 weeks, we partnered with our friends at the Cutler to hold our live documentary spotlight in New York and Los Angeles. I conducted interviews on 14 titles now contending for the Emmys. You can hear some of those conversations across our past 3 episodes, and now we complete the series looking at 3 standout biographies. We begin with the Netflix film Martha, about Martha Stewart. The filmmaker R.J. Cutler got his start in documentary over 30 years ago when he produced The War Room, about Bill Clinton's presidential campaign. R.J. has maintained a prolific career ever since. His best-known films include The September Issue, Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry, and Elton John, Never Too Late. Let's go to my conversation with R.J., recorded last Sunday in Los Angeles. So, R.J., before you started on this project, what did Martha Stewart mean to you?
A lot, but not much. I mean, a lot as a figure in the culture, somebody who I was aware of. I was not a subscriber to her magazine, nor was I a watcher of her show, but I was, of course, aware of the arc and of her presence and the journey. And I remember thinking, when it was announced that Mark Burnett had made a deal with her while she was in prison and there were multiple shows planned, I remember thinking, oh, that Mark Burnett, he's so smart. He's, he figured, he knows she'll be back, and he knows she'll be back with thunder. And, but other than that, that's what I knew. And the origin story of this project is that my wife and I were having dinner with a friend. We were out in Montauk, where we go for a couple of weeks every summer with our family, and the friend called that afternoon and said, Martha Stewart wants to join us for dinner. Is that okay? And I'm like, sure. Is she cooking? Is she going to bring her? But she wasn't. So, and we met that night and chatted, and it was clear to me that this was something that was on her mind, making a film, and she was ready to tell her story. You know how important that is. And she had a remarkable story to tell. Everything she told me about her life was kind of counterintuitive to what I would have. It wasn't a life of privilege, a background of privilege. It was a working class background. She went to work young to help feed her family. All of those things that you learn in the film, I learned that night, and this complicated relationship with her dad. And anyway, it became instantly intriguing to me and exciting. I thought, here's a story of American womanhood over the last part of the 20th century, the first part of the 21st century, and she agreed.
So one of the reasons she's such a success is because she has taken charge of so many things, and that can be a tricky relationship for a documentary filmmaker. So what was that like?
Awesome. Well, we agreed that night, by the way. We discussed, I don't want to say we agreed because we didn't agree to necessarily make a movie that night, but we discussed the fact that were we to make a movie, I would have to have final cut, that's the way that, that I work. And she embraced that immediately. So there was that. And there was that understanding, but she's Martha. And, as with any subject, you need to kind of go into the grain of where the possibilities are. And she was very clear and I became very clear about the fact that Martha is not somebody who is prone to self-reflection. You know, this is a woman who is charging part of her success, not only is the perfectionism and the control, but the fact that it's the future that excites her. She's always forging forward. Was one of the first business people to really understand the power of synergy. One of the first people to really understand the power of the personal brand. They're on and on and on. She saw all of these things. Her magazine was the first magazine that had an iPad version. There were so many examples of this, and part and parcel with that is not a lot of dwelling on the past, and forget therapy. I mean, and during the interview, I ended up interviewing her multiple times to kind of acclimate her to the process. And to address that lack of natural comfort. But she kept on saying to me, I've never been a day in therapy in my life, and now R.J. Cutler thinks he's going to put me in the chair. You know, so it was all of that, and I kind of did.
And so what was that process like? I mean, we see like a moment in the clip where, you're kind of challenging her a little bit on her version of her past.
It was very engaged, in a way, one of the things we decided early on in the making of the film was that Martha would be the only, though we would interview dozens of people, because there are so many points of view and so many chapters to her life, Martha would be the only one who was actually on camera. And this kind of gave her a privileged position, which is something I wanted her to have. For all the times that Martha Stewart's story has been told, never had it been told by her. So here she was in the middle of it. But one of the other things that did was kind of foreground her as a complicated narrator. One might even say an unreliable narrator, somebody who, and so the experience of engaging with her included that, and it was okay. There was a kind of complexity to her, the way she was presenting truth and fact, and when she wanted to resist it, and when she would. I don't know if there's a point in the trailer about this, but there's a key moment in the film where I'm asking her about her divorce, and she really doesn't want to talk about it, and kind of sloughs me off and says, I gave you the letters, just use them. And there we go into the letters, and it opens up this really emotional and powerful and vulnerable verite moment, because you're not only hearing her words, you're seeing her, the way she wrote these different letters to her husband when they were going through their divorce. So it was all very kind of engaged and exciting, to be honest. It was I love chatting with her. I always love chatting with her, even when she's being particularly mean. She tends to be most mean in texts, because she loves to go on. At early in the morning.
When the film came out, she gave a half-hour interview to the New York Times detailing all the things that she didn't like about it. And I even wondered at that moment if her being so savvy about the press, if she was giving that interview intentionally to make people want to see the film.
Well, whatever would make you think that? I did get a text that night saying they're having watch parties in my neighborhood! ! So, but she had her opinion. Listen, it's to be expected that if Martha Stewart were to have made the film and to have directed the film, it would be a different film. And bless her. I said this to her so many times. This film was. We were able to make this film because Martha Stewart was courageous enough to let us tell her story and to trust us to tell her story. And in doing that, she made the film possible. And I have nothing but gratitude and empathy for that. And sure, this person who's used to being so in control of everything would have a hard time seeing somebody else's version of events or a film about them. And she did, but she has so come round since those days and has been really a great supporter of the film.
What are some of the conversations you've had since then? I mean, what do you think kind of resonates for her from this experience of it being out there?
The impact that it's had on, particularly on young women who tell her, she says she now is recognized in a way that she wasn't before, which is surprising to me because I think she was one of the most recognizable figures in a way, but she'll say people will call out to her from cars and things like that. But it's really the impact on young women who tell her that they're inspired by her story and by her perseverance and by the fact that, it's a man's world and you got to contend with that. And she has contended with it at every step of her life and with great success. I mean, you look at the film, it's a film about a series of extraordinary triumphs, every single one of which is resisted by a patriarchal figure. A time and again, she's told she's wrong. It won't happen. We don't. Even the publisher of her first book I wanted a cookbook with, a black and white cookbook with recipes. And she said, no, I'm going to make the most beautiful book on entertaining that's ever been made. And I'm going to be at the center of it. And he didn't understand, but she gave him two choices: to either do it her way or don't do it at all. She went to Condé Nast to do Martha Stewart Living, the magazine, and they did what they do there, which is a kind of pilot issue, and the pilot issue was enormously successful. And Cy Newhouse, the head of Condé Nast, said to her, okay, what are we going to call it? And she said, Martha Stewart Living. He said, no, we have to call it Condé Nast Living. We can't. And she said, okay, see you later. And off she went to Time Warner, and she made her magazine called Martha Stewart Living. And this is who she is every step of the way. So the fact that young women see this movie and are inspired by her, by this aspect of who she is, it means a tremendous amount to her.
RJ, you've been in this world of documentary for over 30 years. The first film, The War Room, came out in theaters. And what I've always admired about your career is, you've tried to, follow the river of where things go. When network television was doing things, you were doing things on network television, and now you've got your own company and working with multiple different platforms on multiple big subjects. How do you? I mean, the documentary world feels in a kind of fragile state these days, and I wonder how you look at it with all the experience you have.
Well, you've been there most of the way, so you've seen it as well. I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist. It's and the thing I'm most optimistic about is the industriousness of my peers and my fellow documentary filmmakers. I mean, I learned, as you know, you mentioned The War Room. The directors of The War Room were D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hegedus. I learned at the feet of the masters. I learned from the pioneers. And one of the things I learned was that, you got to come at this. We are, in a way, outsiders to the entertainment industry. And we are people who have to find new ways in, and we always have. The War Room, nobody wanted to distribute The War Room. It was only October Films, this little startup company run by Bingham Ray and a few of his colleagues, who saw opportunity, and they gave us nothing for it. But it ran in theaters for months and months and months. When the September issue came out in 2008, we went to Sundance, and nobody wanted it. It was the same thing, similar thing. And this is what the documentary world is. So you have to find ways, you have to find other ways and other paths. And I believe that that's what we're seeing happen now as well. You have to step back from it and realize that marketplace is cyclical. We had a great boom with the streamers. It was a wonderful run for a while, but you can't look at that as the finite period. I think one of the things that 30 years of doing this gives you the advantage of is to have that perspective and to see there have been ups and there have been downs, and like these times that I just mentioned, and there have been boom times, and you got to kind of roll with it. So as I say, I have enormous faith not only in the kind of perseverance and craftiness of my colleagues, but also in the artistry, most of all in the artistry. And so the what streamers want and don't want and are buying or not buying aside, we are still in a period of incredible creative, fertile creativity. And it's thrilling every year, as you know. Every year, you're showing amazing films and programming amazing films. Doc NYC is having there's Tribeca's going on now, and all of the festivals. What we see at Sundance are it's nothing but a cause for celebration and inspiration. Even though, look, it's still tough. There are gonna be times when it's gonna be tough. So we do our best to kind of keep our heads down and work, keep on working at this machine, which is the company you mentioned. We try to support filmmakers as much as we can. I direct maybe a third of the projects we do, and other filmmakers do the others. So we're doing our best to support the community, and that's who we are. That's who documentary filmmakers are.
RJ, thank you for this film. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Support for this podcast comes from Disney Plus, presenting Beatles 64. From producer Martin Scorsese, witness the Beatles' first trip to America through never-before-seen footage and interviews, and see why Rolling Stone calls Beatles 64 a fresh look at how we became the United States of Beatlemania. Deadline raves it's a nostalgic, enlightening must-see. For your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Documentary or Nonfiction Special, Beatles 64, now streaming only on Disney+. Our next project is the Netflix series Chef's Table Legends. The filmmaker David Gelb had his breakthrough with Jiro Dreams of Sushi in 2012. Until then, television about cooking was either a competition or a how-to. David introduced a new way of looking at chefs, combining luscious cinematography with compelling character portraits. That led to his series Chef's Table that has spun out into several seasons. It's so distinct that it even earned a parody written by Seth Meyers for the series Documentary Now. Look up the episode titled Juan Likes Chicken and Rice. The new iteration, Chef's Table Legends, looks at 4 groundbreaking personalities. One of them is Alice Waters, who launched the farm-to-table movement through her Bay Area restaurant Chez Panisse. David Gelb is the director of that episode. He joined me along with his cinematographer Adam Bricker, who's worked on Chef's Table from the start. Let's hear our conversation. So, the two of you have been on this journey since the first season of Chef's Table, and I want to ask each of you about what it was like kind of creating the look and the theme and the approach to this series from the beginning. Let's start with you, David.
Well, the ethos or the origin of the show kind of came from, first off, thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much. The origin of it came from a movie called Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which was a documentary, thank you, that was kind of like, I had the chance to kind of explore with it because I had no financiers or producers that wanted anything to do with it at first. Jiro himself, while we were shooting it, said that he thought we were making the most boring movie ever. I think that was in the second hour of the octopus massaging sequence. And so it was a blessing because then I could just, I borrowed money from my dad and my grandparents and was lucky to be able to do so, and had the chance to kind of experiment and cook, as it were. And so that allowed the opportunity to shoot on the Red 1 camera, which had just come out, allowing it was like a moment of technology where you could use this camera and you could do the whole thing on your Mac Pro And so you could make like a planet Earthy looking kind of thing without all the crew and the post facilities and like all that stuff. And so the idea then for Chef's
Also,
Table,
like animals on the table are easier to film than animals in nature.
sure, once they are subdued, to put it kindly, they yes, that's exactly right. And you can still shoot at a very shallow depth. You shoot at a shallow depth of field, and you can get it in focus because they don't move that much, only a little bit. And but it was like kind of this special experience and times of major doubt and fear. And then it would start to work. And I think if anybody's in the film making profession or TV or anything, you see an assembly and you're terrified. But through massaging it and working on it, and we imagine eventually bringing on a small kind of post team to help me, we managed to kind of make it through. And so when it came to the idea to do Chef's Table, another thing that nobody really wanted except for Netflix, they were the only place that would even hear the pitch on it. The idea was to shoot chefs telling their own story without the traditional kind of travelogue kind of host or competition or pack up your knives and go home talk show kind of format. The thought was, I want to make another thing that is not traditionally a food thing. So everybody on the crew, especially Adam, had no experience shooting food. And the idea was to shoot it like a movie. And then, Adam kind of just took this look to a whole nother level. And so I'll kind of turn it over to you.
Yeah, not only had Will Basanta, who was my fellow cinematographer on season 1, and myself, we hadn't shot food. I also didn't have much documentary experience. I had seen Jiro in film school, or just after film school, and loved food. But yeah, no doc and no food shooting on the resume. So I sort of Jedi mind tricked David into.
No, it was by design. So who is mind tricking who is the real question.
There we go.
But I knew that they like to eat. Everybody on the crew likes to eat. We all like the idea of it. But much like I never thought I was going to be in documentaries or that was going to be my main focus, I don't think anybody else on the crew really did, except for our other executive producer who may be here, Andrew Freed. There he is. Andrew Freed was the producer of Iconoclast, which was like the only doc series that I was like, oh, this has some real kind of cinema quality to it. And so Andrew helped us. I mean, it took a year to make Jiro. We did Chef's Table. I think it was like in 9 months, and six of those in 9 months or something like that.
Yeah, I think we always talked about them as films and really wanted to approach them from a filmmaking standpoint with great intention, sort of matching the intention that the chefs were bringing to their own dishes. And so, we made, and with my lack of documentary experience, I didn't think that maybe it'd be wise to shoot on Zooms or lightweight tripod. We were traveling with a cinema package and really just like seeking to make something that was just so filmic. And I think that, that intentional approach to the filmmaking was also practical because we had to do what David had done over the course of many years with Jiro on a tight 7-8 day shooting schedule. So we really had to come into it with a plan and understanding what the narrative was going to be, and that we just had to do it. But it also allowed us to make really specific, intentional, creative choices.
So, David, of these 4 episodes, the one that you direct is on Alice Waters. And I wonder, why you picked that one, if it was a choice, and what Alice Waters means to you.
Well, it was Alice Waters is the one who chooses. Typically, Alice Waters is kind of she's, and this is true of all of our chefs. The chefs themselves are directors of their own worlds, and so it takes a certain kind of dance and a trust building process between the cinematographer, the director, and the chef to be able to kind of comfortably integrate into their kitchen, take up a lot more time. We use up a lot more time of the chefs than in any other food show, I'm sure, in history, because I was actually just on Phil Rosenthal's podcast, and we were talking about how, he comes in and he spends an hour and then he kind of moves on to the next place. We're in there for like 2 weeks, and we relight their kitchen, and we figure out how to integrate our camera crew which is, it's a cinema camera crew. So we have our focus pullers and we have our.
It's not like these chefs need the publicity.
Well, these ones definitely don't. And I think that a lot of our chefs, though, find that it is helpful. I think even our, because it's still a razor-thin margin. They have all these restaurants, and as you see in the Legends episodes, a lot of their restaurants have failed, and have come close to it because they really have to run at full capacity to work. And so we don't even shut the restaurants down when we're in there. In the case of Alice, she's such a boss. She's never allowed a documentary ever to be made for her, and she said that she wouldn't do it unless I was there every single day, working on it with her. And so that was a pleasure and an honor. And she makes the salad her way, and she doesn't do multiple takes. And so we kind of just we made it work, and she was so kind and generous with her time, and her team was so amazing. And she's just such a genuine person. It's inspiring for us because she is someone, as she says right in the beginning of the episode, impossible is not a word in the French language. She believes in what she's doing deeply, and it's just an incredible inspiration. And she's doing really great things and teaching kids. Not only they teach kids how to cook, and they teach kids how to eat in her edible schoolyard project. And I think that's so important. And I have 2 small children, and I'm trying to teach them the joy of vegetables, but without I have to cube them into Minecraft shape is usually the way that works the best for me.
I'd watch that episode.
Yeah. Cubism in vegetables. Yeah. So she was wonderful, and I was glad that she was willing to do it, and she's been so supportive.
Adam, from a visual standpoint, in the Alice Waters episode, is there something that when you watch the show now you feel especially proud of what you got there?
Well, so Adam, Will Besant, our other origin cinematographer, worked on that one with me. Adam did the Jamie Oliver.
I'm happy to take credit for the Alice one.
But
well, maybe
there's a lot of nice flowers and things like that Adam would have done.
Ask you
well
of the work that you did do in this particular series, if you can describe a scene that you felt really nailed what you were trying to do.
Yeah, well, so this for this Legend season, we were so lucky to do the Jamie Oliver episode. I've always wanted to do a television chef. I think it's so interesting, because Jamie he has restaurants now, but his life isn't spent in the kitchen. He's on set shooting, and I just was really excited to take our visual language and apply it to behind the scenes photography. And then it's actually just looking back through Jamie's archives, his work on The Naked Chef. It was really inspiring. I love those shows. I wasn't really familiar with that series, and the camera work is incredible. He was shooting 16 millimeter film, handheld in his own apartment, and I think prior to Jamie's work, so much of cinema, so much of food television was shot in a studio, 3 cameras on a pedestal, and Jamie really broke that mold. And it was just fun to see how that work that he had done 25 years ago sort of trickled into our visual aesthetic now. The way he positions the camera over the chef's elbow feels very, very chef stable. So my favorite moment in Jamie is when we go back and forth between Jamie cooking in his kitchen with his wife on one of the first episodes of Naked Chef, and then we sort of recreate what he was cooking in our show, and they edit back and forth, and we weren't really frame matching. We were just kind of doing what we were doing. And in the edit, there are great parallels that are really exciting.
And I'll just add, one of the things I love about that, well, first, it being the Naked Chef is removing a lot of the kind of artifice that would be in a studio. So you get kind of a more kind of personal and kind of, I guess, raw approach. The other thing that I love about what Adam did in that episode was we got to shoot in full 8K, which allows us to really show a very satisfying kind of transition between the 16 millimeter footage to our big footage. Our
Jamie's stuff is so good that we had to up our game to make sure there was a distinction there.
Yeah. And so I love that. And then, he just has so much charisma. And so it was just really cool to see Adam kind of working with that.
So, David, as I wrap this up, I want to ask, you have a blessing here going with this franchise that's lasted for many years, but it's also an extra challenge, I have to imagine, how you come back with a new chef's table and keep it interesting for yourself. And I wonder if you can talk about that.
Well, sure. I mean, we are incredibly fortunate. We were the first original doc series on Netflix. And that's 10 years ago. So we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary, which is why Legends is like a very special season to us. Thank you. Thank you. And, we're still here. We started when orange was the new black. We're and it feels, but it's
like
still,
a sentence.
Yes. It still feels fresh, though. I mean, it really, and I think that the reason is that there are so many stories. There's so much, if you go back to Jiro Dreams of Sushi, a whole part of his ethos is that he's trying to be a little bit better every day. And he knows that he's a perfectionist, but perfection it's not real. It's an idea. And he knows that. And real perfectionism is not, I don't show anybody anything until it's perfect, because it's not attainable. But we try to do a little bit better each time. We watch what we do. We get the chance to sometimes show it in theaters. We get to see what people are reacting to. And we just try to do it a little bit better. And so, it's our hope to keep going with Chef's Table and just trying to do a little bit better, each time. And even though we feel like this, institution, my dad always likes to tell, my dad runs the Metropolitan Opera. He's a filmmaker from back in the day. He would do a lot of classical music documentaries. And he likes to tell me about how he's won 6 Emmys. And I have not, and it's really fun because we feel like this institution, and yet, Adam is never, we just are ready. We're ready to go to my dad's office and throw some hardware on the table. But that's
feeling great.
That's not why we do it. But it's really fun to be able to just try to keep doing better. The tools and the technology changes. There's a whole sea change in what's happened, and then the chefs and the culture of cooking has changed so much, over this time. And so also when we bring in new people, there are young people who have grown up watching Chef's Table. And so they're well schooled in how to do what we do. A lot of our people have been there for 10 years. Camera assistants have become cinematographers, editing assistants have become editors, and watching all these people grow. And again, I want to throw it to Andrew Freed, a big round of applause for Andrew for helping us so much in building this team. I was like, I couldn't sleep when we were greenlit. I was like, this is going to be a disaster, because it took so long. It was so hard to make Jiro Dreams of Sushi, and I did that I couldn't trust anybody. I was such a micromanager, and I shot it and did the sound. But the team has made Chef's Table has come so far because of this incredible team, and they make it possible. And giving them the space to cook, as it were, is the greatest privilege. And so I'm so grateful to be sitting here with you.
Oh, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Well, you can watch on Netflix thanks to David Gelb and Adam Bricker. Our final project is music by John Williams on Disney+. It profiles the composing genius behind Jaws, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, to name just a few. The filmmaker, Laurent Bouzereau, has made a career exploring cinematic icons with documentaries about Faye Dunaway, Natalie Wood, Steven Spielberg, and many others. Several years ago, he was my guest on episode 43, talking about his series 5 Came Back. Here's our latest conversation. Laurent, what was the first music of John Williams you heard?
Jaws, I believe, 1975, just 50 years ago.
And what did it mean to you?
Well, I grew up in France. The accent is real. And movies would come out later in France, American movies. And I was obsessed with American cinema, even at a very young age. And so I would seek out everything I could find on those movies ahead of their release in France. And so I was kind of introduced to all of my favorite American movies through music, because the albums would be available. And so John Williams kind of scored my childhood, and that was a little way for me to say thank you.
So you've done a lot of work with Steven Spielberg and around other parts of his library. How did it? It feels like this should have been done years ago. Like, how did it finally come around to look at John Williams now?
So I've had the privilege of working with Steven for like 30 years and done a lot of documentary films, not only about his films, but outside series, all kinds of stuff. And every year, I would say, when are we doing the documentary on John? I would ask John as well, because I've known him also 30 years, and it was always a no. But when he turned 90, I had a chance to put together a little tribute, something, for the Kennedy Center. And this was just for inside guests. And they asked me to interview a number of directors who'd worked with them, including George and Stephen, JJ, all. And they were just supposed to say happy birthday, John Williams. And the discussions were so incredible. And I really got a sense of the impact that he's had on cinema. There's no other artist aside from directors, actors. I mean, like that are that has had that kind of impact, and he's inspired so many people. So I said to Stephen, Stephen, between your archive, George's archive, my archive, those interviews, we have to make a film. And so took a little bit of work to convince John, because he is forever so humble. But, my way in was to really talk to him about music. I'll give you an example. In the film, I knew he had lost his wife. At some point, his first wife.
But when he was in his early 40s,
exactly,
he had 3 teenage children. It was
exactly
a tragic, sudden thing.
Yeah, but I never wanted to be investigating his life. So I said to him, well, I love the first violin concerto. Tell me about writing it. He said, I lost my wife, and he started telling me that story. So it was approaching him, understanding that music is his life, as opposed to putting him on the spot, if that makes sense.
I mean, that is a very meaningful part of this story to me. His wife passes away in 1974, and it's just a couple of years before he does Jaws, Close Encounters, Star Wars, all the music that we know John Williams for. Although it's another fascinating aspect is how much music he had done before that. Gilligan's Island, for instance, that that I didn't know. So he is a shy person, personally shy, but obviously artistically confident.
Totally. Yeah.
How do you see, though, that dichotomy?
I think it's all the great artists are like this. I think, outside their art, they're very reserved. They're very much into their heads and humble. And once they're behind a camera or conducting, suddenly the true personality comes out. And that's why, I had access to so many scoring sessions, and frankly, I was like, you've seen a scoring session. It's different music, but it's always sort of like a similar thing, and they were all different. I mean, you could see a different aspect of his personality emerging, and so that was really interesting, and to see, his love for musicians, and the love that he gets back from them. It was truly inspiring. I was afraid that the film would feel maybe a little bit self-indulging or something, like a hit parade. But I found myself discovering things about him and understanding my own passion for film music, which actually it's thanks to him that it's recognized as a true art form. I just don't think that we can take that for granted, that before him, I can say that the Max Steiner and all that had that kind of status that he got, and the fact that he was able to also go into doing concert work, which is a huge aspect of his career, particularly with the Boston Pops, which also kind of surprised me. Something I didn't know is that the musicians rejected him at first because they felt he was playing, commercial movie music. What is that? And so even the community sort of, and he stepped down and came back after negotiations, obviously, and discussions. But I think we owe him a lot, and a lot more than we realize. Filmmakers like Steven and George also, acknowledge that power that he's had over their filmmaking.
So there is an underlying question here, which is how can one person have so many different creative peaks in them? We any of us might think of 4 John Williams scores off the top of our head, and then if we think about it more, we'll think about another 5, and your film shows us, and there's another 50 that you didn't think of. Do you feel like you got any better understanding of how one person has all that inside him?
Yeah, I think I do, in a sense that John loves classical music. He has a lot of respect for the history of music, and therefore he has been able to reinvent himself for new generations of filmmakers without ever compromising that love that he has for the classic, for the timeless, right? And Steven is the same way, by the way, as a filmmaker, Whereas a lot of his contemporaries, John's, were going after the synthesizers, even composers that I really love. They were trying to be, disco, the Giorgio Moroder era, and Flashdance, and Midnight Express, and Chariots of Fire, Vangelis, all those were just new sounds and new ways of exploring music that, would have, it's not my thing, but John, by being classic, remained timeless.
I wonder if you can talk about the music editing. Just in the trailer we watched, we're hearing, little bits of many different scores, and it speaks to the power of this music that we only have to hear a few bars, and we're like, Jaws, Star Wars, Indiana Jones. But I think there's a lot of invisible work happening here with your music editor, and I wonder if you can talk about that.
Yeah, so that was such a challenge. First of all, there's not been a day that I have not listened to John since I discovered him. Makes me emotional because, again, it's so linked to who I am as a lover, as an admirer of cinema and music. I built a series of playlists for myself as I was preparing for this film, as I was shooting. I was literally listening to him nonstop, but in a very sort of biographical kind of way, but by genre, if you will. So war films, Steven first 10 years, Steven next 10 years, kind of thing. So there was a little bit of, logic to my madness, and worked very closely with my editors. There was one particular one who is also a true expert on John's music, and that was very helpful. And with John's music editor also, who knows his rhythm as far as cuts very well. But funny story is that when my film was announced in the trades, was going to go into production, I got so many calls and emails from composers wanting to compose the score to the film by John Williams. And I was like, I think I got that
covered.
I think we're covered. But the thing that was really interesting and some people have picked it up, which makes me feel good, is that there was the story that we were telling of the specific films. So, we're talking about Star Wars, we're using Star Wars music, but then there was the music that was illustrating his journey, and those were very carefully chosen as well, to the point where it became very expensive. And even though, I've had the privilege of having gigantic names and behind this film and support, the budget was...
Money is money.
But the budget was very tight. And I didn't compromise, but I had to make some choices, let's say, So that's really important to understand that those films are still very hard to make, particularly films about music. But I'll tell you a story, is that we were on the mixing stage of this movie at Skywalker, which was a great privilege and really fun, but we know expensive, and we're 45 minutes away from overtime. And we get a call from our lawyer saying there are 2 queues I cannot clear. There's an issue with them. And had it not been for those playlists that I'm like, oh my God, so this is 70s kind of laundry kind of music, Earthquake. That music would work there. And Ramiro, John, say, oh my God, not only does it work, but it's exactly the timing. And I said, the next one, 90s, okay, we haven't used Lost World. I think we're clear there. It's Universal. I think that'll be cool. Okay, so that cue from Lost World, and boom, it worked. And it was actually better than what we had before. So it kind of paid off, to have this subliminal brain of attachment to his music for as long as I've had.
Wow, we do have to download your brain at some point of all the film knowledge that you have. Do yourself a treat if you haven't seen it yet, and catch Music by John Williams on Disney+. Thank you very much, Laurent Poussereau.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I want to thank all of our guests. You can watch Martha and Chef's Table on Netflix, and you'll find Music by John Williams on Disney+. Thanks to the Ankler team of London Sanders and Hannah Hensler. Our Los Angeles photographer is Todd Williamson. And thanks to our team, Doc Voices writer Bella Racklin, series producer Hannah Nordenswan, and web designer Cross Strategy. Our theme music is composed by Andre Williams, and our executive producer is Raphael Nehausen. I'm Thom Powers. Follow us on Instagram and visit our website at purenonfiction.net.